All right, welcome to this episode of the Chiefs Challenge with John Vance, Terry Garrison, Nick Brunacini chiming in and hanging out with us as well. On this episode, we are going to just be all over the place, and it's really just a cathartic experience for us to be able to share with you, and hopefully you share with us as well. So let's kick it off. Welcome to the Chiefs Challenge.
All right.
Nick's got some questions for us, so let's hit those up.
All right. Well, I'm going to start at the bottom of the list because those are my favorite questions. The other ones you guys pretty much beat the balls off of already. So you guys are the fire chiefs. So you're the apex of the pyramid, right? the fire service pyramid for your community. How do you moderate your egos?
Oh, that's funny. So I remember when I saw that question. So Nick sent the questions to us a couple hours ago, and I thought, that's funny. That's a funny question. So when I made fire captain, and I went home to tell my mom that I made fire captain, I said, look at this, I made fire captain. She replied with big balls in Cowtown. In other words, she didn't care.
Yeah.
And so my ego was in check all my life.
You grew up in a place that did that for you.
I got my ego checked pretty regularly at my house. And, but you know, there are people that, that probably, think the job comes with an ego, but and you guys, you're going to go, oh my God, this guy's so full of shit. But I really do, and I said it the other day at this meeting that we had, is I believe in servant leadership. I think that's what Brunacini did, is he talked about servant leadership all the time. And so if you absolutely cannot have an ego if you're going to serve people as their leader. And it sounds funny to say it that way, but I purposely try to not have an ego. Like even when firefighters, we do promotions and stuff, it's little things like, you know, when they gather everybody to take the picture, I'm on the end. I'm in the back. It's like, let those guys have it. That's their picture, right? And there are some people that will make you uncomfortable being a fire chief, and you know, I'm uncomfortable around those people that are really obsequious, right? Brown nosers. I can spot them in a heartbeat, and it's like, I don't want to spend any time with them. So there are fire chiefs. If you have an ego, you can find enough people around you to feed that ego in every organization. Yeah, I don't feel like I've ever had an ego, and you can't have an ego when you grew up where we did, working for the best fire chief in the entire country who didn't have an ego. So how are you going to say, look at me, you know? And I really believe that everybody who's ever been a fire chief out of Phoenix or got a fire chief job or assistant chief job, they got that job because they worked for that guy. And I remember the first job I applied for, it was Oregon. And I can't remember the city all of a sudden. The football team, the Ducks. Where's that?
Eugene?
Yeah, Eugene, Oregon. Eugene, Oregon. Thank you. I don't know. I had a brain fart there. I'm not a young man. But anyway, I went there and I did an interview, and I was still a Phoenix firefighter, and I knew my drop was coming up. And the guy specifically told me, I want to hire you because I saw Bruno talk at a conference 8 years ago, and I want a Bruno type guy here. And I said, I'm not Bruno. And from that point on, it's like, dude, you are getting this job because you are affiliated with that guy and everything he did. And then after that, when I would tell people I'm applying for a job, and it was interesting because it applied not only to city managers and people that heard about Bruno, but it applied to unions. So I know that when I got the Oceanside job, you know, I retired from Phoenix after a long weekend of 3 days because I applied for the job before and got it. The union was like, hey, man, you're a Bruno guy, man. We want you here. We saw what Bruno did. So I figured, like, my entire career as a fire chief, I was using the skill traits that I learned from him. And I wasn't emulating him. I'm not going to try to be Bruno. I'm too tall for that. Right. Mm-hmm. But I think that if you just understand where you come from and your role in the organization as being a servant leader, and what I've been lucky, and I have it now, I had it in Houston, I had it in Oceanside, is, and it says it on the outside of this wall right here, right? And what does it say? It says, if you're the smartest guy in the room, find another room. So what I do is, as a fire chief, is I find really smart guys that enter the room with me. I make them my ops chiefs and my personnel chiefs and those guys. And honestly, I know sometimes after meetings, they must walk away and go, that's got to be the dumbest son of a gun I ever freaking met. Because there's some concepts that I don't understand, some simple concepts about budgets and some of those kind of things that really smart guys get. So for me, ego, I never even thought about as an ego. I would go to large functions in Houston, where, you would have politicians. I remember sitting next to Kurt Warner, one of them on the stage and all these functions. And I would leave as fast as I could during the function and go home and eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and sit in front of the TV and watch Bonanza. So for me, ego was not a problem. I wanted nothing to do with that. And I still don't. It makes me very uncomfortable. So
I subscribe to a lot of the same stuff that Terry talked about and that Bruno used to talk about. I think we all, clinically, we all have egos. It's just you can't have a big ego, especially in this job. If you want to survive for a long period of time and have longevity as a chief officer, no job is beneath what I'm asking anybody to do. And I'm not saying I have to hop up and load hose and all that kind of stuff, but people have seen firsthand that I'm willing to help out and do whatever is required or whatever I would ask other people. And the other thing I think, as far as egos go, is, again, I'm just the conductor. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I totally buy into that. Just trying to make sure everybody's going in the same direction. And it ain't about me. I mean, you see fire chiefs out there that make it all about them. The light shines on them constantly, or they're the ones who always have to pee in every corner of the room that they go into and get their fingerprints on everything.
6 bugles.
Yeah. They weld a 6th bugle on to their collar. And that happens.
No way.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And I told our people from day one, and we're still doing it, and a couple of things. I never even introduced myself as fire chief. I always say that I work for the city or I work for the fire department, depending on who I'm talking to. Although my son caught me once, a very beautiful girl at a party came up and she was talking to us, and my son knows my ethos and he hangs out with me a lot. He's an only child. And I introduced myself as the fire chief to this woman. And he goes, I know why you did that, Dad. Yeah. She's pretty hot. It's like, it's like the one and thanks, son, for calling me out on it. Yeah, I need to get knocked down.
That's a smart kid.
Yeah. But, it's not about us. And people don't work for me. They work with me. We all work at the fire department together. And no one wants to work for that guy.
No, nobody wants to work. So we have a group of fire chiefs on the west side of the valley, and there's probably about 8 of us. And not one of them is that gold badge kind of guy. And I think I told you guys before we even started here, when I got to Glendale, they would have their chief officers meeting once a month, and they called it the gold badge meeting. I was like, stop that. That's ridiculous. That's a silly thing to say. We could be command officers, chief officers, whatever you want to say. We can be knuckleheads, but we're not going to be gold badge. If you got to look down and remind yourself you got a gold badge, you probably shouldn't be in that position. But isn't it easy to spot the guys with the egos? It's kind of like that guy my dad used to say, old cowboy, my dad, and he'd say, man, the guy with chicken shit in his hat is the last guy to smell it, because he got so used to it. These guys with the guys with the big egos, they're so easy to spot, man. And they usually burn pretty bright and then they fizz out, right?
They don't last long.
No, they don't. They do something really silly with somebody.
Typically.
Most of them suck at the job too.
No, they take
what they did before they got promoted, and they just, I don't know. It's almost like you talk about being charmed, is they always, the timing was impeccable. So
Right.
And I think it kept validating that they thought, oh, look how smart I am.
I think so.
You know, I keep getting promoted. Well, no, they're going to promote somebody. You just happened to be in the way when they were doing it. So you got promoted.
You know, Bruno used to say something that was really interesting is he says the best bosses are validated by their employees, not by their superiors.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I live by that. He told me that because I asked him, how come I can't get along with the city manager, man? Honestly, there was places I worked, I couldn't get a pay raise. It was not going to happen because I spent the whole time arguing with the city manager, and that guy wasn't going to give me a pay raise. And he goes, well, what do your workers think about you? I said, I think we get along pretty good. And he goes, well, isn't that most important? And it's like, yeah. So you get the best bosses are validated by their employees. Absolutely. In fact, I told my city manager that when he told me how he felt about me. It's like, oh, well,
that must be why everyone else likes me so much.
Yeah. Right. And that was the last time that city manager and I talked.
You know, I remember I was having this conversation once with my old man, and about, you know, gradings and PA and how you figure out raises. And you think this whole thing's just a scam. He says, yeah, anything with the money in it is. I said, you know, what if you just turned it around and instead of your boss evaluating you, the people who work directly underneath you evaluate you? Wouldn't that be more telling? And he thought about it for a minute. He looked at me. He says, no. He says, they're not going to be honest.
No, they're not.
Says,
they're going to like.
He says, it's going to cause a revolution and too much turmoil. And he says, now they have a stick to beat one another. He says, it turns everything upside down.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing with ego. You can't have contempt for the people who work with you at the fire department when you're the chief. And I know so many people who are, you know, those a-holes or whatever. I genuinely love the firefighters that work with us.
Yeah.
It's a noble profession. They work their butts off. They're dedicated. They do a great job. And I honor that. You know, I'm there to keep them safe, make sure they can retire healthy and happy and, you know, have as much fun post-retirement as they do at the fire department. And people forget that.
I love them too. I mean, honestly, I do. Even the knuckleheads, they're entertaining, right? Sometimes when they do something wrong, we were talking to a guy, I was talking to a chief officer the other day, and he wanted to discipline a guy for something. And the guy made a mistake, and he wanted to pretty much beat him up. And I said, okay, so here's my philosophy on that. And I'd never said this before. I don't know why I guess I was with my grandson and it made me think of it. But I said, here's a way we ought to be as bosses when we discipline people. It's like your kid running in the street. So you're out in your front yard. Your kid takes off, runs in the street to do something goofy. Car almost hits him. You run out there. What's the first thing you do? You pick him up. You give him a hug. You okay? You ask him if you're okay. You walk him back to the yard, and then you go, you little son of a gun, don't ever run out there. And I think there's a lot of people that forget the hugging part on the front end. And then there's some people that forget the discipline on the back end. You got to or the lesson, I should say, not the discipline, because it could be coaching and mentoring and all that. But you got to do both those. And if you really care about firefighters, you'll do that hug in front. First thing, man, that was really goofy what you did. Are you okay? Is everything? If somebody does something really goofy with a customer, I like to get them into talk to a counselor. Hey, man, I don't know if you need to go to a program or not, but maybe you ought to spend a moment and we talked about anger management or whatever. I don't know if you're angry or what, but that was so out of character for you. Why don't you spend some time talking to somebody and maybe thinking, maybe if you develop you need to have 2 sessions or no sessions, but go talk to somebody, man, because that wasn't you. So anyway, I don't know why I went off on that one, but I think back to egos, Nick. They're so obvious. I think the good news is that there was probably a time in our career, you guys remember, where supervisors had a lot of egos. And I think there's less egomaniacs out there now in the fire service. And I think that's the great thing about this single level entry program that we have, you know, so everybody becomes firefighters and they work their way up through the system and then they promote as they go. That kind of helps keep the egos down, I think. But I just remember when we came on, there's a whole lot of people with a whole lot of ego. And maybe I don't see it because I'm the fire chief and they don't demonstrate it to me, but it just doesn't seem like there's as much out there.
It was right about the time I retired. There was a fire chief, new person came into one of the smaller valley cities. This individual did the 6 bugle thing, said 6 bugles, and then he directed his entire senior staff, don't ever make eye contact with me. No, I'm not kidding. I mean, that was his order to them. And then he was going to get out of the Automatic Aid Consortium, and we're not doing this nonsense anymore. And
How long did he last?
well, when he went to the city manager to get out of the Automatic Aid Consortium, he needed to build his own dispatch center, which was like $10 million.
Yeah.
So 15 minutes later, he was gone.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a
Thank you
knucklehead.
for your service. We'll see you later.
Egos eat brains.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the, I don't know, maybe you get enough road rash or maturity, whatever you want to call it. At some point, it's almost liberating when your ego goes away.
Oh,
And the whole, company thing is I'm a company person. And that was money. It's like, especially when you were in the chief ranks, like as a BC. It's like, no, there's no ego here. You got a job to do. I got a job to do. You're going to do your job. Sometimes my job is to make sure that everybody's job around here gets done. So that's where we're at, pal.
yeah, we talked about that too. Is that the other day? Kind of all this stuff comes up, but we talk about positional bullies, right? Mm-hmm. So a guy makes a certain position. He promotes a battalion chief, and he's got a manifesto, and he goes out and he writes everything down on a piece of paper and gives. And we haven't seen this for a while, but they write it down on a piece of paper and they say, "Here's what I expect from you." But that's not leadership. Leadership is showing up every day and saying, "Hey, when you did that, here's a better way to do it," or "Hey, that was really good. Do that again." But every once in a while, you'll find a positional bully, and you got to correct those right away. You can't allow that to happen. But same thing, how does the ego? So when people have egos, how do they treat other people? Like you said, the guy treated him like shit. Don't look at me. Well, ego kind of presents itself in a lot of different ways, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes more subtle in the way they treat people, and you don't even see it for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you want to be a boss and sit in a room and say something and have everybody nod their head in agreement with you, even though they didn't agree with you? Wouldn't that piss you off as a boss? So you want to be challenged as a boss. So some of these guys that have these egos, where for us it's just the opposite, man. If you let me do something really silly, I'm not going to be happy about it. You guys need to tell me when I'm a dumbass or a knucklehead, and that's what you want from your people, your team, right? But I remember walking into the fire chief Brunacini's meeting once as a brand new deputy chief, and he said something. He was talking about embedded safety, and I was new there. Nick, I was your boss.
Sorry.
No, that's how funny it was. I wasn't. Remember when he said, "You're going to be Nick's and John Hinton's boss?" I said, "Oh, a promotion?" They go, "No." No, you're just going to go in on a staff job. You're not really their boss.
Yeah, we're taking you off of shift work.
And I said, "Thank you. I don't want to be their boss."
Yeah,
but so I went to my first senior staff meeting, and it was just a few months before Bruno was going to leave, maybe less than a year. And he started talking about embedded safety. It was just that beginning of that conversation about how the battalion chief's partner should be the safety officer. Man, what a brilliant idea. And embedded safety on the fire ground. Everybody does it now, right? And he kind of threw it out there and nobody said anything. So I thought, hey, I'm the ops guy. I should probably comment on that. So I commented on it and kind of gave him some feedback and agreed with him and went back to my office and was followed by a couple people in my office that were in a meeting, assistant chiefs. Don't ever do that. What are you talking about? Don't ever feedback. Man, he's going to have us working all over this shit. Mm-hmm. It's like, what? No, man, don't engage him. There's just another idea. It's like, oh my God. I told him that years later and broke his heart. Because, I mean, you could see that look in his face, like, I can't believe that they would do that. It's like, yeah, they did. That was their...
Yeah, you can. Come on.
Look who they are.
Yeah.
But they did that, and it's like, oh, my God. So I guess that's the other side of ego, right? You want to be challenged in your position.
I will say that I acquiesce on a lot. I mean, because it's not my fire department. I certainly take ownership of things, but if it was the John Vance Fire Department, things would look completely different than they do. It's a group effort, and it takes all of us to make it work. And there's a lot of stuff that I disagree with that I sign off on, you know, because it's just like, well, maybe the greater good, maybe that guy knows what he's talking about. I mean, you got to pick your battles, right? Like seat belts, that's a battle. Like I would defend that one all the way. But when it comes to other stuff, you know, a uniform redesign, and I don't even care about that stuff.
No, I don't care.
I mean, it's like whatever it is, as long as it's not going to cost us too much, and that's what you guys want to do, and there's some kind of majority on it, you know, that's really where we want to go. All right, I'm not gonna fight that.
Yeah. So the fire ground's autocratic, right?
Yeah.
And then everything else is not, all the way up to the chief's role. It's like, man, you guys give me some input. What are your ideas? Man, I never thought about that. That's a great idea. Let's try that. And then, I always say that the last decision you made isn't the last decision you'll make. Right?
Right.
So let's try that. See if it works. If it doesn't work, kind of adjust it or.
Nothing's in stone. I mean, we can always change it. If it doesn't work, we can zigzag. I mean, everybody thinks it's going to be institutionalized, and that's the way it's going to be forever, too. It's like, yeah, give it a try. I don't care.
You get back to change now. It's firefighters that don't like the way things are, and they hate change.
Yeah, right. Bruno Boots.
Yeah.
Oh.
Lou Holtz said that the only person that likes change is a 1-year-old with a dirty diaper.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
The opposite of that is the only people that want to live to be 100 is 99-year-olds. Who the hell wants to live that long? Oh, well,
Crazy.
that was a good question. Did we beat that up, egos?
I think so.
Thanks for listening to my answer. I was going to get mad if you didn't.
No, I absorbed it.
Okay.
It's just- yeah.
Since we're doing two, can you have time for one more?
Yeah.
What do you wish you would have known before becoming a fire chief?
Some of these questions that are like that are the hardest questions, right? Because your mind's like, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I didn't know, right? Hey, when I got to Houston, I didn't even know where the bathroom was. I wish I'd known that before I became a fire chief. Somebody finally told me. Thank you, Miss Pat. But some of the things that Bruno used to, I wish I would have paid more attention to. He used to say process 16 times a day. He'd say, hey, he would use the word process. And I would actually thought, why does he keep using the word process? So what I would tell new fire chiefs or people wanting to be a fire chief or you just became a fire chief is learn whatever processes are in place in your organization. I'm talking about your organization for your city. So we talked about procurement, disciplinary processes, budget processes. Learn processes. And then when you follow the process, life gets a lot easier for you. So I didn't think there was so much process to everything. Decision making and just every day it seems like I'm involved in some sort of process. Where are we in the process? So for me, that's one of the things. It's not very sexy for the question, but it actually is one of those, man, I wish I would have known more about that. And then the other thing for me is early on in Oceanside, when I first got there were people were coming at me in all different directions, right? I was only 49 years old. I entered the drop in Phoenix thinking that we could stay after 5 years, and then they made us all leave. So I had 30 years in, and I had to go find a job, and I was 49. I was kind of surprised that I was a fire chief. I thought, if I got to get a job, might as well get a fire chief job. But one of the things I learned is there's everybody kind of wants something. And I don't mean that in a way that they all want something for themselves, but everybody has an idea or a thought or something that you're the new guy and they want to know, can you do this for them? Or how come we don't do this? Whatever that is. And the city manager, the HR director, the budget director, your firefighters, your union president, everybody's got this list that they're just waiting for you to show up so they can kind of hand you their 2 or 3 items, right? And once again, they're not selfish items. They seem to make sense for their positions. And early on, I thought, man, how am I going to make these decisions? And I stumbled onto back to Brunacini, is I said, I'm going to make decisions based on firefighter safety and customer service. If it's good for the firefighters, keeps them safe, helps them do their job, or if it's good for the customer, that's the way I'm going to lead toward this decision. And then later I heard the words value-based decision making. It's like, well, that's what I've been doing. Aren't I a smart son of a gun? Back to ego, right? Is that I was making value-based decision making and based on those two values, right? So if you do that, and then maybe you should add a third value as a fire chief, your fiscal accountability. You should try to do the best you can with the resources that the city gives you, whether they're fire engines or people or monies and budgets and that. But those are the three big value-based decisions that when I talk to people, I say, hey, every decision we're going to make, every moment we're going to spend, every dime we're going to spend is going to be firefighter safety or customer service. That's the value-based decision. I didn't know that going in, and I didn't even realize I was doing that until about 6 months into really struggling and figuring out. And then somebody I think it was your dad. We used to have breakfast a lot, and I think it was a conversation we had where he realized, hey, man, you're making value-based decision making. I thought, I am? I are?
Yeah, it's interesting because you talk about process, and that's just the system. It's like using the command system at the scene.
Right.
That's the process we use to make decisions and get work done and all the rest. So those are extremely important. But sometimes they'll bump up against leadership a little bit. And you'll think, okay, how long are we going to wait for the process to take?
Right.
And an excellent example of that is with when you went to Houston,
Mm-hmm.
and then the issue of protective gear came up and reed hoods.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me a story where a young firefighter, you were in a fire station talking about reed hoods and how that was going. And, that's a huge process-centered thing.
Right.
As you got all kinds of people hitting that.
A lot of ownership.
Oh, it's huge.
Personal for them.
But for this young firefighter and his generation, is they hated those things. And so they wanted them gone. And I remember him asking you, Chief, these reed hoods, and you talked to him about process, and he says, well, yeah, that's all good and well, but what'd we hire you for then? And you think, wow, man, you are an assistant chief today, young man.
Yeah. Actually, I like when people kind of call you on that kind of stuff. But what we did is, man, there was, with the reed hoods in particular, there was so much ownership. That was tradition. In fact, I met the guy who invented it. What an awesome dude.
The reeds.
He's still there, and he's still around, and just, oh gosh, just a great, he's the American hero firefighter, man. If you had to put him on a firefighter poster, this is the guy you'd put. And, but the hoods were too cumbersome, and they were too big, and they were too heavy, and they needed an adjustment. So there was a division within the organization. So, he wanted me to make that change. Well, would he have felt that same way if he didn't support the reed hood, right?
Oh no! That's a giant landmine if you go touch it to do that.
So what you had to do is that had. So what we did is we and I don't know if they have it now, but they actually got reed back, and they said, help us design a new hood that has better visibility. It's easier to operate with. You can use it with a mask. And he came back, and they worked on kind of a combination Nomax reed quilt type hood and came up with something that really seemed to work. So there was a compromise that you can keep the tradition, you can take care of those people, you can get it right the way it needs to be in the newer generation, fitting the new masks and the new hoods, or the new equipment. But that was, so when something is most sensitive, slow down, right? Because the people on either side, because it is sensitive, want you to speed up, right? So that's when you got to think, oh, we better get a lot of input here, and I need a lot of, mandatory overtime. We're still getting input on that and seeing how that's going to get processed. It still hasn't reached its final, and it may never be a final. It may be revised all
No, that's
the
just
time.
a horrible situation to have to be in. And I don't know if there's a right answer there.
But I'm glad you said that, because process can, and I'm talking about the formal process, but that was a process, right? So think about the process we went through with the recovery after Brett Tarver. That was a process that Bruno had in his mind that we didn't know where the heck he was taking us. And he had this process in his mind, and we were all walking through that process.
Yeah, but I don't know that he knew where it was going to end up.
Maybe not.
I mean, there was
He knew the steps a little bit, probably.
there was too many different separate elements of a recovery process like that versus like the Reed Hood. And you think, okay, you can't have something that takes you to 1,800 degrees when your mask fails at 300.
Right.
You're going to kill yourself. See, but that's an emotional thing, like you said, and there was a process to do that. And it was really designed to, I think, replace the hood and to keep everybody from getting killed that was involved in that redesign and change.
That was it.
You almost have to do it. See, I think a good example would be like the piece of apparatus that everybody sits down and said, we're going to get a new ladder truck, or we're going to get a new whatever it is. And so you have this enthusiastic group that designs it. And then Vance made allusion to it. He says, I don't agree with all of it, and I have to do it anyway because I'm a member of the organization. Well, there's some fire chiefs that are like, no, I'm going to protect them from themselves. I know they really liked it like this, but I'm going to change it.
Yeah.
So he gets the final draft, and then he makes the changes, and then the truck comes in. And they're like, well, no, this ain't our truck. And, well, yeah, I had to make some changes for you. Those people always end up leaving within 6 months.
So I created a process, I thought, and I'll let you jump in, but I created a process because we're talking about process. So I had some people complaining in Houston, 90 plus fire stations, and each one of them has a special emblem, whether it's, the Fighting 55.
We have our own tattoo.
Yeah, and they're really cool. Every one of them is really beautiful.
That's the
and those guys own that, right? And so we had some people complain. My assistant chief at the time, he may have been the only guy. He may have been setting me up. But he came and he said, hey, people think some of these are racist, or some of these logos are inappropriate or whatever. And I said, okay, we'll put together a group of people, a diverse group of people, fire captains, firefighters, engineers, battalion chiefs, and go work on this, and then come back.
Shifters.
Go collect every one of these emblems, and then go through them, and then come back and tell me which one you guys think as a group is inappropriate. And so they did that, and it took a month or so, and I wanted a patch on each one of them. Never ended up with that, but they came back, and out of the 94, they thought there was like maybe 15 to 20 that were inappropriate. So I said, oh really? So I look at him, and he's sitting there, the assistant chief that I put in charge of this, and it was like a flaming clown face, inappropriate. Why is that inappropriate? Well, because it's a clown, The little guy, Notre Dame boxing.
Fighting Irish guy.
The Fighting Irish guy, that's
leprechaun.
inappropriate. The leprechaun's inappropriate. And there's like 20 of those, and they were all those kind of things. And I said, well, this is bullshit. I said, they're all appropriate. And I said, thank you for your work. And the committee lost their mind. Oh, we go to the fire chief. He asked us to do all this work. We spent a month and a half doing it. We would come back with these. We think these are inappropriate. And then he just said, no, they're all good. I don't think there's a problem with any of them. And I just threw everything out. So sometimes I walked all over that. Now I've told him I'm very apologetic about you guys doing all that work, but no, you guys are so freaking wrong on every one of these.
Well,
They're
you're
all
a sewing
perfect.
circle. I mean, I'm going to save you from yourself. So these 15 go and the rest stay?
Yeah. But it was interesting. The process did allow me to get a look at every one of them. Mm-hmm. So but there was nothing inappropriate. Not one of them was they were all pretty cool.
You should have made a yearbook out of them.
I think there's somebody has done that. There's probably a guy there, Scott Merlot, and he probably did that. But my deal was I said to the committee, I said, I want to have a patch on each one of them. So bring me the patch and I'll look at the patch. Well, that was my way of just getting free patches. They didn't fall for that. They just gave me a bunch of pictures.
Well, it was like painting your mascot on a bomber during the Second World War.
That's what you do,
I mean, it was
right?
just what it was. It was, yeah.
But it was silly. It was a flaming clown and a skeleton head and,
What would they have thought of a raging queen?
right?
Arr.
Punish me, Captain.
So anyway, that was so process. I didn't use process very well. Have you ever had a process where you let go forward and then ignore the entire process?
Yeah, and you have to come back and backtrack that and explain why you're going to do it. I mean, that's what's happened to me, because I think there was one time I ignored, and there were some good reasons for it, but I never explained it.
Yeah.
So I think when you explain, like, hey, we had this, I really value what everybody said, but because of these factors, we've got to go in this direction with it. And,
Yeah.
not everyone's going to be happy. You can't make everyone happy.
No, they're not going to be.
And as I said earlier, I'm not even happy with everything all the time.
No, my B shift came out for a minute when I was looking at him and he was sitting across. I think there might have been one or more committee members, and I said, "This is bullshit." Whoops! I actually said that. Sorry, guys, but kind of is. So
Hey, yeah.
Houston can keep all their patches, and all their logos.
Well, how many complaints had you ever gotten from any of them?
It was an internal complaint. They wanted,
guy.
They wanted to paint on their apparatus store, their emblem, and I said, do it. I thought ownership of your community and your fire station and camaraderie was a good thing. Now you don't want to. Sometimes that creates exclusion. You got to be careful with that. But I think that if people are doing it for the right reason.
Yeah, there was a period of time where I campaigned for the right rear compartment belonged to the company, and they could put what they wanted on it.
That's a good idea.
And they said, "No, we're not going to do that. We know what you would paint, or but you don't get B-shift paint and let them do that kind of thing." And it was a couple years later, the union started selling ads with that compartment.
Oh.
So like Banner Health would put their thing in there, and you ask, why are we doing this? And union money, man. And they were shoveling into the coffers.
They probably saw you paint that tree.
Yeah, it could have been. We worked for a place that was kind of a renaissance, and you could do some artwork.
Yeah, right.
You could inflame the other shifts occasionally.
Spray painting a live tree. I want to give John a chance to answer that too. About
what do you wish you would have known before that you didn't?
There you go.
Not to take things personally. And I've been doing this 20 years, and I think my first 6 or 7 years, I took everything personally. I wore every personnel problem. I kept myself up at night. It almost ended my marriage. I probably have some PTSD. I went on, and I was a small town fire chief. My first job for 8 years, I was a 30,000 person community with a combination fire department where we only had 8 or 9 people on duty. So I'd go to every call. It was before we had battalion chiefs. I'd go to every call, every fire, every serious car accident, kind of thinking that I need to lead from the front. And
Oh, wow.
if there was somebody dying, I would go be with that dead person. If there was something going on in my neighborhood, I always responded. So I ended up with like 3 or 4 dead neighbors and a tension pneumothorax and a baby with a heart problem and all this other stuff that happened directly adjacent to me. And then not only that, just owning every problem that the fire department had. And if something didn't happen, taking it very personally. One of the pieces of advice I'd give people is people are not going to like you sometimes just because of the virtue of what your job is. There are people who just hate the boss, no matter what they did. So I don't need to be liked. I'm a lot more confident and comfortable with myself now. I know that I don't, and especially in my job right now, I don't have to own everything that goes on in the fire department. I don't have to go to 600 calls a year, which I was doing for a while. And I did that because my predecessor did that. The fire chief before me did that. And I was a new fire chief, and I just thought that's how you had to operate. My life would have been a heck of a lot easier if I learned to put some distance in there and not work 60 hours a week. And I had some bosses that were pretty weird where, those interactions I would take personally. My interactions with the board, I would take very personally. Anytime I had a board member that would try to impugn my character every chance he could, I would take that personally. So anyway, I would say don't take things personally because I feel a lot better now that I don't.
No, good for you. So one thing I'd tell you that helped that I knew that I would advise if anybody's thinking about, and you probably agree because you reminded me of it because of what you were doing. But a lot of people, as they're starting to decide to be a fire chief, they kind of move away from operations and they get into more of the management, the budget, and all those areas because you need to know that too. And I think that the thing that's helped me is just being an ops chief. And I know I frustrate my ops chiefs because I'm in their business all the time. But when you have an event like we had with the Southwest Freeway, where you lose firefighters, or you're sitting across from Ellie Groover and her husband just died, and you're talking about fireground stuff, you need to stay connected to the job that firefighters do. And a lot of fire chiefs believe that's kind of secondary part of their job, that's the ops chief's going to manage that. You need to know that. You need to know it mostly when something tragic occurs. You better be able to talk. And Bruno Cini did it, and I try to do it even the other day when I was talking to the leadership group. I use the decision-making model away from the fireground, right? What are the critical factors? What are you willing to risk? What's your strategy? And then develop a plan. You can use all that organizational stuff that's taught in Blue Card and apply that to your management position in just about every way possible. But the biggest failures I see with fire chiefs is they move away. And then with that, they do lose some respect. Now, I could tell you the city manager that will hire fire chiefs do not care whether your people respect you. They do not care whether you're an ops guy. They don't care whether your people look up to you. You're a firefighter's fire chief. They don't give a shit about any of that. They care about you can do a budget. You're going to be a part of my team, right? You're going to be a part of the city team. But when you're firefighters, and I said it, you're validated by your employees. Your fire chiefs are validated by their firefighters. You better know and care about the job that they do every day.
Well, I think operationally focused fire departments are the successful fire departments, and you know which ones aren't operationally focused too, and it comes from the top. And if you've got some other kind of focus, uniforms, color fire trucks, ornate firehouses, whatever those things are, it's pretty apparent, and people call bullshit on that pretty fast versus genuine interest in the operations of the department, making sure people are well trained, making sure you're hiring the right people, making sure they're focused on the right things, giving them the tools to do it. I don't care. Again, I'm in a smaller department than what you guys worked in, but I want them to have the conversation about hose loads. I don't give a crap. As long as things are uniform, that's really what matters. But if you want to do a modified Minuteman or a whatever, okay, let's make a decision and go with it. But we have good discussions around that. And I'm sitting in the room for those discussions because I want to learn. I learn something new every day. So it's good to be involved in that decision, but I'm not the one making the decision. What would you say?
Well, I was never a fire chief.
Well,
that's what I learned is I am not a fire chief. Thankfully,
not taking things personally is a big thing.
I think that's a huge part. See, I got the most when, once I promoted off a company and as a BC. And then you said, okay, this is what we do as an organization. And see, as a company officer, I would see BCs quite often who I didn't think were really doing their jobs. It's people were doing things that you thought, no, what this is, So they had the wrong, they held the wrong things to their standard.
The wrong focus, huh?
Exactly, yeah. So when those things came up as a chief, and you thought, no, I'm not, now it's time to talk and walk the walk. And so you would sit down and have these discussions with these people, and it's like, no, we ain't at the hugging point yet, pal. You need to stop doing this. Well, who do you think you are? Blah, blah, blah. So pretty soon you're like, well, okay, I'm just going to do what needs to be done, I guess. So you would take whatever action needed to be taken at that point. And that may be dropping paper on somebody or suspending them or doing whatever it was that they merited with whatever action you were dealing with. Well, once you did that the first time, you thought, wow, I just did my job. And then the effect it had with your relationships with the other people you worked with, it was noticeable, and they weren't afraid. It was almost like they were more comfortable around you, that, oh, okay, this is... So you could, I don't know, I think just those simple acts of doing the stuff that you thought, when I'm in this position, this is what I think is more important, and just kind of operating that way. And that really was liberating for me, at least, as I thought this is... And see, the key to that, though, is we had a boss that supported customer service and firefighter safety. And I knew as long as I do that part of my job, what can they do to me? As long as I don't do something stupid, that would cost me to go to jail or my family to leave me or whatever that is. So you had a lot of running room in our organization. But if you did what you were supposed to, it seemed to be better for everybody. I guess is the...
You said something interesting about we had a boss that supported customer service and firefighter safety. So I start my session with this group, and we did a couple, it was just an hour talking about leadership. And I started with, we did two of them, and we're probably going to do a third so we can catch up people that were out of town and give them an opportunity. But I started with, hey, I had one of you guys, you may be in this room. I knew he was in the room. I said, and captain's test coming up, and you wanted to meet with me. So you call the secretary, say, can I meet with the fire chief? Well, I meet with everybody. They want to meet with me. Come on in. I can't spend a lot of time because then I got, places to be. I got to take my nap and things like that. But so he comes in. I said, okay. He says, yeah. And I know he's a great guy, and he's going to be a fire captain. But he says to me, so I wanted to meet with you. I'm taking a fire captain's test, and I wanted to make sure that my organizational values match up with yours. I said, oh, okay. I said, what are mine? He looked at me. He goes, what do I care about? He goes, firefighter safety and customer service. I said, meeting over. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So if he wouldn't have, how disappointed would I have been if he wouldn't have said
uniforms and
or because I sign everything, be safe, be nice, be accountable. Everything's about customer service, firefighter safety. And if he wouldn't have got that, so what if fire chiefs, one of the things as a fire chief is decide what's important to you and then see if that matches up where you're going and try to bring that value with you. And it's so easy. I mean, we can copy each other. I copied Bruno. That was his. That's mine. That's yours too, right?
Be safe, be nice, be effective. I mean,
that's
it. And your management philosophy shouldn't be so complicated. It's like the John Vance 23 steps on how to run a fire department.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I'm not able to do that, and then no one else can follow along. But you see people doing that all the time. They overcomplicate what should be a simple process.
Keep it simple.
And it's very episodic. As you would see people who you think, okay, I know this guy's a boss and he does this and he's, and we're always judging and rating each other silently. And you think, yeah, he's kind of a mid-level mouth breather type guy. But they would do, occasionally something would happen that would become so public and they would become champions. There was a period of time where, bunch of captains wanted to become fire investigators because it was just, you set your own schedule. There was overtime just galore. It was just a sweet deal. But you had to go to cop school to become a fire investigator. So all these captains, senior captains are in a room. There's 30 of them, and I think they needed like 8. And so the chief of all the fire investigators is there, and he's addressing the crowd, and he says, this is the way this position works in the promotional process to get it. And he explains, the fire side and the seniority and the rest, and he says, the wild card in this is you have to be certified as a police officer. And he says, to do that, you have to be hooked up to a lie detector.
Yeah.
And he looked at several of the people in the audience, and he says, there's several of you in here, and you know who you are. You don't want to go in that room. Right. Don't do it. Well, is is just the way it's going to be. Is the people who know they shouldn't are going to be the first ones to go into that room.
Yeah.
So sure enough, guy gets in the room and he starts spilling the beans. The auditor got up and left and called his boss, who was a captain, I believe, on the police department, and said, if I ask him the next question, I'm going to have to handcuff him.
Oh.
He says, go in the room, unhook him. I'm going to call his boss. And he called the boss who told him, and he came and he collected him. And you thought, this is all righty. You just went up about 12 notches in the leadership thing.
Yeah.
Oh, it was tremendous. So just things like that, that's the other great part of our service is because it's lifetime employment.
Yeah.
So there can be redemption for people who just keep getting it wrong. Eventually they get it right. You almost want to celebrate them for that. Right. Then it's like, finally we've had a breakthrough, it's just having them myself. I know how good that feels.
Well, not everyone's superstar, number one. And when you help that person who, they're having performance issues and you have a little faith in them and you actually believe in them.
Yeah.
That just empowers them to go on and do good. And, it's great for us. I mean, maybe that helps our ego a little bit. Right. But on the flip side, you're helping people out. You're helping people develop their careers. And that's
well,
it's a pretty cool
in
thing.
Our systems now, it's somebody, that old, and I don't know if you guys heard this, I'm sure you have, is live your interview.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
yeah. So that's it, right? So at one point, that guy who did that knuckleheaded thing said all the right things and seemed like he meant it when he said them, and he got the job. And he beat out 3,000 other people to get that job. So let's see what. Where did you actually take a left turn?
Well, and look at all the time and resources and effort invested in each member of the fire department. I mean, just the training piece, and if you're a paramedic, that's 10 times, and it's just
sometimes people self out. Right. So I had in Houston, I had guys that would self out, and we always had a second chance management. We'd go to the Louder Mill, and I'd always say, okay, you're on this probationary period. And when they walked out of the room, it's like, I'll see that guy back in 5 months. I'll see him back in 4 months. And they selfed out, and I had to fire him at that point. But you give them an opportunity. But people, Bruno used to say that they select themselves out of there. I used to tell people, I don't know what you're going to do tomorrow, but you're not going to do it as a firefighter, whether it's Houston firefighter or Glendale or whatever. But
we're going to have other opportunities to talk coming up. So I feel like we're newlyweds right now.
Okay.
And we're really getting it on. But,
Matt, you got like 8 shows here.
Yeah, you got to figure this out.
There's something that you brought up that on top of taking things personally, was also when you opt out, you need to be able to do that as fire chief. You did it. You talked about doing it.
Yeah.
There's some days you just need to go home.
No, you do. It's like, man, if you get it, so what is a fire chief's third alarm, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes after a disciplinary process, and I sit across from a guy, it's like I go, okay, I'm done for today. That's all you're going to get out of me, because I'm either going to be angry about something and you need to know how to monitor yourself, because you got to be it's what we told the supervisors the other day in this class. Consistency is the key, man. Don't show up a different fire chief every day. That's probably the biggest thing you need as a fire chief, is you got to care about your employees and then be consistent.
The same person needs to show up every day. And if I can't do that, I need to either call in sick, go home early, whatever it is. And there's been probably a handful, and I can think of 3 right off the bat, personnel issues that I handled poorly because I yelled at somebody and I just let my anger come out. Right. And those are times I just sent myself home. And I told our people that I worked with, hey, I had to send myself home yesterday because I was so upset. Yeah. I had a firefighter who I knew was a problem lying in wait because he was a sexual harasser. I had paper on it. I knew it. And he was in the report room and kissed a female firefighter out of the blue on the lips for no reason, uninvited. It got turned into me. And instead of doing the process, I went to the fire station to scream at him for 15 minutes because that made me feel better. And I just was so frustrated because I knew he was going to be a problem. Where now I know better. I could have probably got rid of the guy if I did a formal investigation, worked the process and everything else. But there are times that, and it doesn't happen a lot to me anymore, but you just got to dismiss yourself.
You do. Today I actually took off the second half of this day after viewing a council meeting, a workshop. I talked to you guys about it before we went on air, and it was so it was just like, oh, I'm so frustrated right now. I don't want to talk to anybody and say the wrong thing. So I had some personal leave I got to use before the end of the year. It's like, hey, I'm taking 4 hours off this afternoon, and I got my job done and went home. So, but you got to check out sometime, and don't go home and share with your spouse. My wife, if I shared everything with her, I'd be living alone.
Yeah.
People don't deserve that. Your loved ones don't deserve that. It's nice to have a good support system, but don't make them support you every day as a fire chief, because that could happen too, right?
Well, it's important as a fire chief officer to have the trusted ears that you could talk to. And it shouldn't be your wife. I don't think either. Because they don't get it and it just burden. But to have the other chiefs you commiserate with and that you kind of have the similar outlook, and then they can call bullshit on you too if they, because you're that tight that if you're.
It's funny because when you said that, I was thinking when you asked Nick, what do you think about this chief's question? He goes, I don't know. I'm not a fire chief. But actually, Nick has lived vicariously through me as a fire chief because he's heard about every story that's traveled through Oceanside and Houston and now Glendale. So he actually has an opinion about all those.
I'm a psychiatrist for fire chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Comfortable couch.
I think you said it. As the member selects themselves out. Yeah. That's what happens. Is they just cannot conform to the society that we live in anymore for whatever reason. Yeah. And I don't know, it probably happened 3 times in my career where I got a phone call and they said, you got to come get Jimmy. And you show up to the station and Jimmy is lit up. He is not on this planet. Substance abusing of some kind of white powder, more than likely. 3 times, I think there's 3 different people I did that within a couple years where you would pull them out and you do the process with them. You take them and you and it's so clinical that you're just doing your job and going through. But my experience is all 3 of those people were dead within 6 months. 2 of them retired because they had time to, and one collected a pension check for like 3 months. The other one did like a month. Yep. And they're gone, man. They can't cope with life at that point. And I don't know what else you do with them, but there's no way they can. And we were sometimes a third chance organization. Yeah. But I mean, it's just.
No, we'll probably talk about discipline more or maybe some of that later. But I just remember what I wanted to do in Houston specifically, because it was a large organization and we have all types of people there. But I wanted the paper to say whenever they did whatever they did next, to say former Houston firefighter, so that the organization didn't own that, right? Former firefighter. And it paid off a couple times because they did some really goofy stuff. And the fire department didn't need to own that.
Well, and you're protecting the organization then. It's like, no, you can't. It's.
We're fortunate for what hasn't hit the news a lot of times.
Oh, boy.
Oh, exactly. Well, in hiring standards, as you think, how do we have these hiring standards in this process we go through to get these, the best individuals. And sometimes you'll be sitting around, we ought to just throw that out the window. And like professional HR people, no, don't ever throw that out the window. You have no idea. Yeah. If you have no hiring standards, that's what you're going to end up with.
And if you hire somebody, if you lower that standard for any reason, get ready to own that person for 30 years.
They'll stay.
They'll stay.
And they probably have ugly parents.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Yeah. Well, it's a new day.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Great discussion.
Thanks, Vance.
Okay.
Vance.
Bye.
Gary.
Well, that wraps up this edition of the Chiefs Challenge. Would like to thank Terry Garrison, Nick Brunacini for hanging out and talking about issues facing us. If you have anything you'd like us to comment on or an idea question, whatever, our information is in the show notes. And we'll be back soon with another episode of the Chiefs Challenge.